Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, How Duke Energy Powers Process Automation with RPA. My name is David Goodstein, and I'm a Member Services Coordinator for the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. It is our pleasure to be the co-host of today's event with Kofax. We encourage you at any time to submit your questions to today's speakers. To do so, please click on the questions box, type your question in the space provided, and click on the submit button. We will also be doing a poll question, so we ask that you please choose from the options provided. Today's webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recorded webinar. It will also be available on our website at rpai.com. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Dan Goodstein. Dan?
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialed in from today. Thanks for joining us in the next installment of our RPA webinar series, How Duke Energy Powers Process Automation with RPA. Thanks to our friends at Kofax for sponsoring today, and to the folks at Duke Energy for sharing their story. Before I get started and introduce the speakers, let me briefly introduce the organization, RPA AI, for those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars or events in the past. We are a professional association focused on RPA and all types of automation, now including artificial intelligence as well. We provide a variety of resources for our members, including events and networking opportunities, as well as education and content and various other services to help you with your automation journey. So let me introduce our panel of speakers today. As I said, we have the benefit of a great solution in this space, the folks at Kofax. Russ Gould is the VP of Product and Solution Marketing there. And then we have some folks from Duke Energy here, Paul Watkins, who's the Manager of Customer Web Technology, and Edward Leonard, who's the Director of Financial Projects, who are really going to share their stories with you today. So let me ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves in a little more detail and maybe give us a little bit of background on your career and your role. Russ, let me start with you if you don't mind.
Okay, sure, no problem, Dan. My name is Russ Gould. I'm responsible for Kofax's global product marketing, actually for all our products. I joined 4 years ago focusing on Kapow, which is the core of our RPA offering. So it's been actually a very fun ride for these last 4 years. I've got more than 20 years of experience in product marketing and product management at a variety of enterprise software companies. So RPA has been really fun to work with, and of course, the time is now for RPA, and it's been really exciting. Hot little market going right now. Paul? Want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Russ. Yeah, Paul Watkins here at Duke Energy. I've been with Duke for about 8 years and started out with our new product development group. I was the ideation manager, bringing in new ideas into the organization, and eventually ended up the manager of the customer web technology team. And that team basically is kind of being rebranded into more of a digital technology group, because we cover more than just web. We have SMS, we have web, we have email, a lot of different things. And I'll also be moving into a new role, which is the manager of our digital strategy group, which is going to cover all the different digital strategies. So 2018 is going to be a pretty interesting year. So pass it over to
Thanks,
Edward.
Paul.
Thanks, Paul. My name is Edward Leonard with Duke Energy. I'm the Director of Financial Projects. I've been with Duke since '97. Been in and around the accounting department and controllers department in a lot of different roles. Been internal reporting manager, closed consolidation manager, a lot of experience around the GL. Have been working recently on integration work, implementing financial systems, and doing support of those financial systems. And a job that's kind of landed in our shop, we are looking at process improvements. And I'm taking over that role with the team and using digital strategies to get there.
No, great. Thank you, guys. So just a bit of housekeeping. We are recording the webinar. You'll all receive the recording and the slides afterwards. And we will be doing a Q&A at the back end here, so feel free to send those questions in as you think of them, but we will answer them at the back end. And there is a hashtag I'll be tweeting throughout the webinar at hashtag RPA webinar. So at this point, Russ, let me hand it to you, and maybe you can kind of walk us through what we'll cover here.
Sure. So Edward and Paul really are the stars of the show, not me. But what we're going to cover today, they're going to cover today, is they're going to talk about their Duke's journey with respect to RPA. how they got started, what processes they've selected to date, and what some of the challenges as well as what some of the successes are that they've encountered. So it'll be actually very conversational. Look forward to the question exchange at the end as well from everyone. These guys have a lot of great experience here and are doing some great stuff. So with that, why don't we move it on to you, Edward.
Okay, thanks, Russ. So in the finance department at Duke, how did we get working with RPAs? Started hearing about this through conferences late 2016 and really didn't know anything about it. And started talking through the process, learning, going to places, and understanding more of what this RPA tool is. And so we were fortunate at the time. Like I said in my introduction, I support some financial systems. And Russ, can we forward the slides? Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I said in my introduction, I support financial systems. And we were working on a project, and the system actually had the system needed some manual work after it was all implemented. Nothing wrong with the design of the system, it just didn't take the ball to the goal line. So we needed some help there. And we worked with some teams and developed a POC that we could automate these processes. And so we started working through that, and we joined up with Paul, and I'll let him talk about his in a second, but we started looking at vendors and then wound up developing our first RPA in early June of 17. And since then, we have been socializing RPAs, BPAs, digital process automations, throughout finance. We do that through roadshows. We do that through our planning process. So our team goes around different areas within finance and talks about what their needs are. And where can smaller automations take the place of big system implementations. Focusing really on the controllers department and financial planning and analysis, but as we are showing this more and more, we're getting a lot of interest from Treasury, tax, and audit. So Paul, that's how we got started.
Yeah, okay, next slide. We were very similarly going down the same path. In fact, actually, didn't really realize that a lot of people within Duke were looking at robot process automation. A lot of that was coming in through a lot of different system integrators, different webinars. I think I sat in on an IRPA webinar early in 2016. So that's how we were collecting information. And the reason we were looking at it was we had a project where we were going to be sunsetting some existing automations on the web, and that was going to result in about 300,000 new requests coming into our call center as manual processes. So how can we bend that production curve and make sure that we had a way to handle that without having people doing it manually on the back end? And we didn't have any resources we could use to integrate with our current legacy systems. We've acquired multiple utilities over the years, and each of those utilities had their own respective billing system, which was usually based upon some kind of mainframe. And those resources are very scarce and expensive to acquire. We're also in the process of sunsetting those systems, so we didn't want to make a lot of investment in those legacy systems. Timeframes were out 24 months or even longer, and we really wanted to find a cost-effective way to be able to provide some type of automation for the new platform we were bringing online. So we did a couple proof of concepts. We brought some vendors in. Kofax was one of those vendors. They actually came on site, and we were very concerned that these robots would not be able to interact with the legacy systems. A lot of our IT organization had told us that, hey, we've tried this before with other types of technologies, and it just didn't work. We were pretty successful early on, which put us into an RFP that we did early in 2017. And we did start building our first robot in May, but I have to hand it to Edward and his team. They beat us to the first production robot. We didn't get our first production robot in place until July of that year. So that's how we got where we were.
Okay. Hey, I got a question for you guys. It's probably a good time to ask this one. So, in terms of the process and lots of vendors and RFP, could you talk about some of the key criteria, in your RFP, and why these things you guys felt these were key criteria? I think particularly after your experience too, right?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in first if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, it was really interesting because typically in our process, what we would do is we go out to Gartner. We have Gartner under retainer. We do a Magic Quadrant and look at what was out there. And this technology was new enough that there wasn't a Magic Quadrant. There were analysts that were around talking about the technology. So going into an RFP, we really weren't as prepared as we would typically be with other types of technologies. And so we didn't really know what to expect. Coming out of it, though, I have to say that the thing that was really surprising was that licensing really became a very important aspect of the RFP for us, because a lot of the different solutions that are out there, they basically license things by the robot. And in our solution that we licensed is licensed by the amount of capacity you want to run on the system. And that freed us up to be able to build individual smaller robots that could do simpler tasks. And those simpler tasks are just easier to manage in our production environment. So that was something that we learned just out of the RFP itself. I'd also say that the administration of the robots and how that works. We partnered very early on with IT, and in fact, that's how we found out about Edward, was through some of our relationships there. And we were looking at this very intentionally at the very beginning as an enterprise solution. So we wanted to make sure that we had the proper controls and administration that's necessary in order to get these robots deployed in a production level environment. And the last thing I would say is that, we had this conception, and I think maybe Edward's maybe a little different in his approach on how he's developing robots, but we were very much a traditional waterfall development shop. And so you do all this, planning and design and everything else before you start building a robot. And someone at Kofax basically told us, hey, look, sometimes you just need to get in there and start building the robot. That's the only way you're ever going to learn whether your processes are right or wrong. And chances are that your manual process is not the process you ought to be using for the robot platform.
Yeah, I agree, Paul, with all those points. The licensing, that really struck out to me because, like you said, I really, early on in the process, I didn't know what a robot was. Was it a thing? Was it bandwidth? I really liked, it's a pipe, and we fill up the pipe. If we fill up the pipe, we can schedule it or buy more pipe. So I like that. That's something that came out of the RFP for me. Being an accountant, I was looking for transparency. So a lot of my business partners, when we talk about robots, is how do I know it's working? So I was looking for that easily to be seen within the robot. So that was important to me as we went through it. And kind of to tag onto that, I see eventually when we get our platform built and get get a little more mature in the process, I see this as something that business can drive. The next 5 processes we automate will probably be done centrally, but we'll figure out some things that can go across different processes. And that stuff is, I would like what I saw in the RFPs, we're looking for in the RFPs, there's not a lot of coding. It's business type stuff. We can use Excel. It's something that's transferable. So those were the things that I got out of the RFP and was looking for when we were going through the process.
Good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
thanks, guys. Hey, yeah, I thought we'd do our first polling question here.
Sure.
And, this is actually one we've asked before, so it'll be interesting when we provide the results of this. We'll also compare this to many months ago when we asked the same question. Where is your organization with your robotic process automation strategy? And select one of the following. No formal strategy, considering, no formal plans, in the planning stages, researching a strategy. You have a formal strategy and actively rolling out RPA and don't know. I'll give you a couple minutes and move on. There we go. So it looks like, most have a formal strategy today. A year ago, that was this list looked very different. So it definitely shifted from more people near the top to more people now near the bottom. Definitely much more active, implementing, doing things, and building out strategies right now. Okay, so why don't we keep moving along? Next up, Edward, I think it's back to you.
Okay, thanks. So where are we now? So like I said, in our journey, we had this proof of concept that we started working and got introduced with, to Paul and started joining at the hip for a while. Yeah. And we took that proof of concept and we automated that within the software. And what we were trying to prove really was how it could touch different things, different applications, different share drives, different emails. Just wanted to show how all that worked. We have used that. We did a nice video that we showed to internally to show what it really meant to people, so they could get an idea around that. We have a couple of other automations in production right now. One's a production pilot, but it's refreshing reports. So we have a lot of people refreshing reports that take minutes, take a good bit of time. Walk away, go get a cup of coffee. Not value add. So we're using the robot to schedule those, to refresh those in the wee hours where people's asleep. So when they come in the morning, we've got that. Starting with a small group there, and we are making it wider and wider as we get more mature with the robot. Another thing that we have automated is we have a team that goes in and pulls information off of a third-party website and saves it somewhere else for another group to use. It's a very tedious task. They have to do it every day, and it takes about an hour a day. We automated that in a couple of weeks so that those guys have some freedom to do other things. So those are the ideas that we've got in production right now. We've got a few underway in development. While we're developing, we're also looking at governance around this. My team is the finance owner of the robotic platform, but IT really supports the tool. So we've been working with those guys to figure out where the handles are. They're helping us build, actually, in some cases. For now, we want to get where my team does that across the board for finance. The governance looks at what priorities we're going to do. We prioritize these builds based on hours estimated, and early on we learned that an hour is not an hour. Day 3 of the close process is a whole lot more important to somebody than day 20. So we looked at that. How mature are the business processes? We want to see that because we want to make sure we know what we're automating. We don't want changes because it slows us down. And ease of automation. That's something we wanted, some quick hits, and I think we got there on some of these. Another thing that we are doing is using these automations for project efforts. So I mentioned earlier that we have done some integrations, and we're using robots to help facilitate that integration by moving some data around or creating master data. Paul, where are you guys?
Sure, yeah. Next slide, please. So, here on the slide, you kind of see the level of robots that we've been able to accomplish so far in a little over half of a year. But before we talk about those specific robots, some of their performance, I think some of the things that I'd like to share with the group are some lessons learned to get to this point. And, early on, and these are the things you really have to be prepared for, things like user ID, security, and credentials. It's really easy to onboard an employee. It's not so easy to onboard a virtual employee because robots themselves behave somewhat like an employee, but they also behave like a process. And so you end up in this middle world of something between an employee and a process, and there are no concepts for that inside of IT security, our business operations groups. You spend a lot of time, and Edward was talking about socializing. Well, socializing is a lot of time just discussing very vigorously why you need something different from everybody else. So that's a real important aspect of what you need to be prepared for. In fact, our IT partner, he basically says, whenever a new process comes in, the very first thing we're going to work on is all the access and credentials at the beginning of the process, before you even start documenting it, because by the time you get the documentation done, then you might have the actual access to be able to start building the robot. That's the kind of lead times that we're talking about. The other thing, too, I'd point out, that's been very successful for us, is this idea of kind of co-developing the robot. So having that business subject matter expert, a lead business analyst, sitting right beside the robot builder to build a robot. And you might think, well, that's a lot of time commitment. In actuality, to build the robots themselves, they don't take that much time. You can sit down with a brand new process, work out the happy path, usually within a half a day of just sitting there co-developing. Because you know the robot builder is not going to know anything about those source systems that you're going against. You need that subject matter expert there to kind of help guide the robot builder and help him or her train the robot appropriately. So that's been really successful for us. So how does that work in terms of the actual robots we've built? So we've built 10 web form robots up to this point. So you might want to understand the reason that we got into business here on the customer operations side of Duke Energy with robot building was because we have a lot of web forms that basically route out to our call center. There's no direct integration between the web forms and our back-end systems. And so that's what we call non-call work. So we were going to target that work as being the very first thing we needed to solve. And there were a lot of reasons behind it. First of all, any web form that goes to the call center, we have a 3 business day turnaround on that request. And so we were getting a lot of requests that were coming in that, quite frankly, the customers weren't going to wait 3 business days. So they end up calling into the call center, and at that point we would actually process the request on the phone. So we had a lot of web customers that were turning into phone calls, and that just creates a lot of inefficiencies within our operations. We wanted to get ahead of that. And our robots themselves, they typically are able to process a customer's web form within the hour, if not within a couple hours, depending upon the frequency we have with those robots. We have 10 web form robots now. They're doing a variety of tasks, but the most popular ones are starting service with us as a utility, stopping your service with us, and also doing transfers of service. And we've also built a couple different net metering robots. One of them's in production, and I'll come back to that in a moment as we talk about the future state of where we're headed with some of our robots in customer operations. And we also have a revenue services robot that's also handling some revenue services functions. Our BESS robot contains about 77% of the incoming web form requests that we have. We've also found that our robots, and this is no knock on our current IT partners, and we really love them, but the robots actually are a little bit better at containment, meaning that they can actually process the request than some of our old automations. And a lot of this, I think, has to deal mostly with the fact that there's a lot of technical debt in our systems, and the robots don't really have to worry about technical debt. They're using the screens to be able to do their processes. And we're now just starting to begin to incorporate robots into existing projects. So we're moving away from just doing the web forms, and we're actually now becoming more proactive in looking at the projects and how we can optimize them, knowing that there are going to be manual processes at some point in that project. How do you optimize that process so that the robot can do it and you can drive that containment up? Next slide. So I actually got 2 slides back to back. Lucky me. This is our stop service request form robot. So we got that robot in production in July, and there's actually a series of these. Every different legacy system has their own version of the stop service robot. Up to this point, we've been rolling that out in waves starting in July, and up to December, we had already processed over 10,400 requests, which equate to somewhere around 1,700 plus man hours saved. The duplicate requests, that's the thing I was just talking about on the previous slide. We were getting about 60% of those requests that were coming in through the web. Customers were turning around and actually making a phone call to our call center. we're able to reduce that down to about 19%. Don't ask me why it's not zero. I have no idea, but web customers, for whatever reason, they tend to always have to call back in for something. So we have been able to reduce that down to about 20%, and that saved us over 1,600 hours worth of additional duplicate work that we have to do in the call center. Our start service request robot, which is a lot more complicated, and there's a lot more potential and upside in this particular robot. We just got the first one in October. We're still rolling those out throughout our jurisdictions, but even between October and December, which is not a particularly heavy period of time for new service requests at Duke Energy, it had already processed over 2,000 requests. And that we estimate that saved about 500 man-hours so far. This will by far be the most popular and biggest impact we're going to have of all the robots, or the start service robots, because we get more requests for start service than we do for our stop service requests.
So Paul, I got a question for you. Well, it's actually for both of you guys, but why don't we start with you? Both of you have talked about partnering. We've talked about business and IT and a little bit on operating model. What are some of the organizational challenges that you guys encountered building consensus and alignment for your RPA initiative? So Paul, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to Edward.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Well, you know, we were very fortunate, and maybe, you know, dumb luck is always better than no luck at all when it comes to the fact that we recognized early on that this technology was going to be an enterprise-level piece of technology for Duke Energy. And so we got all the major stakeholders involved up front. We had IT alongside with the business. We were co-planning and looking at all the different solutions in conjunction with each other. Edward also joined in as soon as we knew about Edward and what he was doing. Hey, let's join forces and work together and try and come up with a good decision we all can live with. So, you know, I think what we've heard from other firms and other organizations out there is if you don't do that, if you try to keep it in your own little silo or make it your own little secret sauce, you know, especially on the business side, you're going to run into a lot of obstacles, and it's going to slow you down. So the one thing I have to say is that that partnership with IT was essential in making sure we could maintain some faster pace when it comes to building the robots. Without them, you know, there were many meetings where without that IT partner in the room kind of clearing the space and letting us do things, we would have been shut down quite quickly.
Yeah, yes, agree with that. Yes, great partnership that we've had with IT. You know, we've had that from the start. We had all the other players in line, so that worked well. A challenge though that I've seen, and Paul talked a little bit about it, but it's what it is. You know, what is an RPA? You know, we've gone through SOX controls around this. We're going through audit services and security. So just the definition, you know, is it a person? Is it a machine? It's something in the middle. But where we've kind of gotten people is it is doing what a person does. We've gotten past the fact that around the controls, we're not breaking any controls. We may even be strengthening controls because we do RPA correctly and we've reinforced so we don't have the risk of, oops, I forgot. So organizationally, that's been, to me, the biggest challenge, and especially around security, getting access into different systems. You know, we get those requests all the time. You're wanting to do what to my data? And so we're getting it more socialized, but we'll still hit on that roadblock a time or two. Russ?
Next slide, please.
Okay, so where we plan to be. So what we're doing in the near term, we're really focusing on heavy manual business processes. My team is working hand in hand with controllers, FPA, across the board to look at their processes, their manual processes, call them lean events, if you will, because we want to understand exactly what it's doing, where can we get value. We are looking at it, in some cases, from end to end. We're going to take big chunks of processes to see where we can plug in to get some relief for the workers. We have a lot of master data. We're putting data in multiple systems. We are looking at ways to improve this master data implementation or inputs. Standard forms, love those. Being, an accountant, we've got to do that, especially getting close to April 15th tax time. Not that we're going to file our tax return with it, isn't that right now, but how to get information into a standard form from a system. And creating standard business reports. I like to use the term copy, paste, attach. So a lot of folks in our tower do that type of work. So that's what we're trying to do on the near term. Longer term, it's putting a little more logic into it. So transaction mappings or matchings, thinking about how a bank reconciliation works. I've got these outstanding checks. Did they clear? Did they not clear? So matching those, and even down to journal entry preparation and uploading. But one thing we don't want to do is take away some of our controls and our governance around this. We want to follow the rules, make sure we do it right, and have everything documented. So, Paul?
Yeah, boy, I tell you, us marketing guys, we're a little bit different.
Wild West.
Yeah, so moving on to the next slide, where do we want to be from a customer perspective? What we found out was that, a lot of our web forms didn't have good data coming in, and so this was really exposed with the robots, because if you think about a call center operation, they're just trying to get the work turned over, and so they might forgive little things like, hey, you fat fingered your zip code, or your account number is off by 1 digit. Our robots are not doing that. They have very strict controls. We want them to have strict controls so that if there is a problem with something the customer's asking the robot to do, the robot will just kick that out to someone on the call center to be able to take a look at it and make sure they make the right judgment call. So this whole garbage in, garbage out type of cycle, the robots are actually exposing where that's occurring, and we're looking at ways to break those cycles in the near term. As I said, robot-specific processes we're looking at in existing projects. And so, for instance, we have a pick your due date a program that we're rolling out across all the jurisdictions. And as we build that capability into the billing systems, we want to make sure that it's very robot-friendly. And so what is robot-friendly? Well, it just means that if you can have the robot do less of the business rules and have the systems have them kind of encapsulated in the process, then you don't have the robot going through multiple screens, trying to make interpretations on business rules. You have all those business rules kind of in its own isolated layer. So we're consulting with our IT architects to make sure that the robots are, these solutions are robot friendly. Smart meters. So we have quite a big rollout, and we're continuing to roll out smart meters across all of our territories. And a lot of those business cases rely upon customer service. How do you provide a better set of customer service to the customers? And operationally, that's always been somewhat of a challenge. So we're looking at how we can use robots to be able to turn on service to these smart meters over the air. Work order status robots. So we have just recently implemented IBM's Maximo system across all of our operations and consolidated that into one platform. And there's a lot of opportunity to communicate work order information out into the field, out to the customers, especially when things are changing. If we're going to change the date we're going to come on the job site, we need to let the contractors know those things. And the systems were not necessarily designed for that perspective, and so the robots are going to help fill the gap with some of that. I'd also like to say we're on a mission to kill faxes in the call center. So a lot of things start out as a digital document, and on the website, customers print those documents out, they write in all their requests, and they then fax those into our call center. And so it goes from digital to analog, and it becomes an impossible process to manage. So we're looking at how we can create web form versions of that, and then make those digital requests that come into the call center, and then we'll attack those with robots in order to be able to take some of that work out of the call center the way it is today. Long term, robots themselves can be their own services, especially with the platform that we have. So how can we create robots that actually are part of an entire orchestration of things that may be occurring with other systems. So the robot becomes an embedded part of a solution as a service that something calls in order to get the robot to do something. We're also very seriously looking at assisted robots for our call center. So how can we get robots to do some of the more repetitive tasks that are happening even while the customer's on the phone, even after the phone, where you're doing kind of wrap-up type of procedures? Could the robot actually do a lot more of the wrap-up procedures so we reduce the handle time that the agents are experiencing? And then we actually had a meeting about this morning about marketing robot automation. So we currently use IBM's Marketing Cloud platform, and robots right now are sending emails directly out from our email exchange system, and we're looking to actually create more engaging emails the robots would send. And so using Marketing Cloud to create more robust templates, the robots would just send the data to Marketing Cloud to say, send this template to the customer, and it would look a lot better. A couple other things that actually have come up in the last few days is a next best action integration. So we're in the process of making sure that when a customer calls into a call center, that the agent's aware of what we would consider the next best action for that customer. It could be something revenue oriented. It could be something that is more of a customer service, customer satisfaction type of suggestion to the customer. And a lot of those things require that you have some type of automation, and the robot would be tied to that process. So the robot would be fulfilling that type of automation.
So guys, one more question for you here, and then we'll do another polling question quick. So, and we've already had some questions already on this. So what is Duke Energy's operating model between business and IT? And you've talked about this a little bit. Maybe you can kind of talk more formally what you guys have done between the two groups.
Yeah, I'll start, Paul. So the way we're looking at it is IT owns the platform. So our software sits there and they manage the bandwidth, whereas the business, my group, manages what processes we put in place. So we look for the ideas, we look for the opportunities. We're also training up to build inside of the business as well. When things change, because that's a concern. You build something on a piece of software, and the software that you built or looking at moves around. The robots have to be tweaked. And so we're wanting to keep that inside of the business as well, because they're the closest ones to the process. We're going to look towards IT to keep our robots scheduled, to work with our vendors. If we have questions on how to build, our IT group is going to be our point of contact first to go say, hey, how do I do this? So working really as a partnership, but more of the over-encompassing from the enterprise level is IT, and we're down processes inside the business. Paul, anything?
Yeah, I'd say we're going through a very substantial digital transformation in our IT organizations, and so a lot of what you see today inside of Duke is we're becoming more of an agile development type of approach and philosophies, and so this particular technology works very well as you sit down and co-develop with a developer in IT. So I think it really complements a lot of our digital transformation objectives when it comes to that. With the customer operation, we actually trained our own robot developers, but the way that our IT partners have set things up is they're basically also a kind of a staff augmentation service. And so, when we have people that may be rolling off of being a robot builder for whatever particular reason, we can always go back to IT and say, can we have some cycles from your robot builders to be able to help us with that? We have done things like what I call mini hackathons, where we get together both our robot IT group, our business people, and other legacy IT groups that we're trying to do some integrations with. We'll spend about 90 minutes. Everybody has a little bit of homework ahead of the hackathon to make sure that they got their pieces ready to go, and then we try to stitch together an orchestration of that solution within 90 minutes, and that's been very helpful. It really helps people understand, why are we doing this, and how do all the pieces fit together? And a lot of times in these in these matrix organizations, that's the biggest challenge, is making sure people really understand that process. So I think it's been pretty successful so far.
Good. So why don't we move on to that last polling question. And the question is, what seems to be the biggest challenge your organization has faced with understanding and deploying RPA? So you've got a number of choices: identifying the right processes for RPA, determining the best approach to developing a center of excellence, cost and licensing models have always not aligned to value, difficulties understanding the differences in RPA offerings, and too early right now to report back on challenges. So we'll give that a few minutes for the audience. It's another one of those questions that we asked before, and interesting. Definitely identifying the right processes, and even more so thinking to the previous polling question and where organizations are today. This is definitely what we see on an ongoing basis with organizations, trying to identify those processes. And, licensing, not so much, and I think, it shows at 9% here, so nothing that's too much of a surprise, having done this now for 4 years. So what I thought we might do is we want to make sure we get to the Q&A portion, because I know there's a number of questions. First, a quick word from our sponsor. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but Kapow is the core Kofax RPA offering. It's really the product that Paul and Edward talked about today in terms of their usage. Definitely a leading platform with almost 600 customers, supporting both attended and unattended use cases. And doesn't matter whether it's a mainframe, legacy application, web-based application, Office applications, Excel, whatnot. Very capable there for any application to build a robot on. And Kapow is part of the Kofax portfolio solutions that helps customers with their digital transformations. So I think it was Paul that talked about Duke's digital transformation. Kofax actually has been doing machine learning for more than 11 years, and we've been doing intelligent OCR for more than 20 years. That intelligent OCR, we call it document capture, but intelligent OCR has become a real hot button now in the RPA market in the past 6 months or so. That's something we've been doing for 20 years. And then we've got other digital business processing and management solutions, and you can see the website here to get more information. So we move forward. Didn't want to get to those questions. There's quite a few, and some of which we've answered. And Dan, maybe you can start.
Yeah, so let's jump into the Q&A. And first, while we're doing that, Russ, thanks to you and to the team at Kofax. You guys have been a big supporter of our RPA webinar series and events. So thanks for doing this. And Paul and Edward, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story. This type of interaction is constantly the feedback we get from our members is always the best type of information. And glad to hear that you were on one of our webinars in the past. So thanks for doing that. So a bunch of questions coming in here. Let's start with the first one that came in early on. So this is for Paul and Ed. So we know who you chose, right? But what were some of the factors that influenced your decision to choose the RPA tool that you did? And you don't have to mention any names, but how did it maybe compare to some of the other solutions that you looked at that you did not choose? You want to start with that, Paul?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that what really stuck out to me in particular was the fact that we had a capacity licensing model that was there that freed us up to really rethink the way we wanted to implement robots. And so we literally today have robots that call other robots. We have multi-step processes that we've broken down, and it's kind of interesting. A simple email process, we've ended up developing 3 robots in an email process, one that checks for emails, one that actually processes the requests that are inside the emails, and one that sends responses back out for emails. And so, that was not necessarily what other vendors had. I mean, you had to bought 3 robots licenses to do that. And I think we made a good decision when it comes to the licensing piece.
Yeah, I agree with the licensing, Paul. What stuck out to me was transparency and ease of use. You can follow through. You can map through the process. So, do I know what it's doing? And you can see through it, and it's pretty quick, and sometimes you got to look closely.
Yeah.
But you can map through the process and understand, yes, it's doing what I expected it to do.
So you guys indicated before that one of the first priorities that you suggest is really the security and the model, the access, those sorts of things. So this question dovetails on that. Before you started building the first bot, how long did that take? How long did it take to stand up the environment, the security model, and the methodology?
Mm-hmm.
So we started, I'm going to say April the 1st. Mm-hmm. Without anything, and we built the infrastructure to develop the robots and acquired the software, and went through the security questions by June 1st. So one thing that we did have as an advantage was our IT guy understood the software that we were automating, so that did help, and understood where the pitfalls could be around access, but it took us probably a couple of weeks just to get the access.
Yeah, and just so you know, I mean, not to downplay the IT security questions, in the RFP there were 400 IT security questions. So it was by far the largest category within our RFP was around IT security. So for us, you basically, we kind of cheated a little bit at the beginning because we ended up bringing in some professional services in order to be able to help us build our first robot because we didn't know anything about the robots. I think, Edward, you just ended up using internal.
We use all internal
folks on the first robot, and God bless you. That's not an easy way to start. So we did have a little jump start in the sense that we brought in some professional services. They helped us learn how to build the robots in the customer operations, and it took us about a month to build our first robot. But really the total amount of bench time, in other words, sitting with the developer and actually building the robot, was far less than that. A lot of what we were doing was hardening the robot over a period of time. And one of the things I'd point out that we haven't talked about is that we do a lot of our robot development straight off of production information and production data. So it's a little non-traditional in the sense that a lot of places you would use lower level environments in order to test your robot before you actually deploy it in production. But because what we were doing was actually taking real production requests from the web and then trying to train a robot just like you would an employee how to do that process, it was just simpler for us to just use the existing process as the way to build and train that robot.
Great. And while we're talking about timelines, there's a question here. You alluded to the RFP. So if you take us back even before that, what was the time frame? How long did it take for the RFP and the initial proof of concept?
I think.
Yeah, we started engaging vendors to do the proof of concept in late November, early December, and we had gone through 4 vendors doing proof of concepts by the middle of January. So it was a very quick turnaround on the proof of concepts for most of the vendors. One of them didn't actually wasn't able to do the proof of concept, but we did it over the holidays. And in the utility, as you guys may know, there's not a lot of people around during the holidays. So it's a particularly challenging time to be doing that. And then as far as the RFP, we wrote the RFP, had it out on the street, I think by the middle of February, and we made our final selection in March. Did the contract stuff, got it all buttoned up in April, and started building robots.
I'm curious, as you went through that process, what surprised you, particularly from a technical standpoint? Were there any things that were kind of a shock or something you would emphasize for someone kind of embarking on the same journey?
Probably just how how quickly you got into really building the robot. I mean, you know, we were very much a traditional waterfall shop, and we had people coming in and they're like, okay, let's just go sit down, and how do you log into the system? And you're sitting there with the robot and you're building the login process, you know, within a matter of a few minutes. And, you know, by the end of the day, you have a robot that's logging into our system. It's, you know, checking certain screens for information, and it was very surprising, exciting.
Yeah, how quickly it went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was.
So thank you. So the poll kind of identified that, you know, identifying the right process is a big challenge. I know you guys kind of alluded to that before. So someone here is asking, you know, how did you identify the best process to automate, and was it a manual process or was it automated? Did you guys use things like process mining? How did you kind of get to that?
Yeah, so we did ours really because we had some pain points, and we had a business partner that needed some help, and we took that on. And is it creating the most value that any robot we've got? No, it's not doing that. It's creating good value, but we'll have more that produce more value. But this, we really wanted a quick win too, because we wanted to get the excitement up. We wanted to show people what robotics was. We wanted to get senior management on board, and we were quickly able to do that. It was a win. It gave back a half day to a bunch of people in one of the most important times of the month, and it really just was a good feeling.
Yeah, I would say, you know, it's funny that the poll turned out the way it did, because once you get inside the organization like here at Duke, you start to have to beat people back on the processes they want to do. It's almost like they always, the first thing they start thinking about is, well, how do I put a robot on this process, which is not always the right answer in some situations. So, you know, you got to be a little bit discerning about, you know, what is the right approach. And is this really the best use of time to build a robot for? And just like Edward was saying, you know, we didn't start out with the highest value use case. We wanted to make sure we could do something that was achievable and do it in a pretty efficient and quick turnaround time, because we needed to have that story started. And so, you know, now we're looking at much more extended journeys. So, for instance, we're taking our start service process, which is largely based upon you know, AMR meters and legacy meters, and we're looking at how can we augment the process using robots so that we can provide a higher level of customer service for AMI meters, and doing the start service journey and differentiating them based upon what the robot can do for us.
And Russ, anything you would add? What do you advise clients when they come to you and they're trying to figure out where to start?
Well, where the biggest pain is, right? The first couple, you know, a couple things, and Paul has said this, you know, it's get started. Sometimes people want to, you know, get everything squared away and have a COE and all that kind of stuff. And I reiterate what Paul says, just get started. The second thing is, there are a few use cases where you know where there's pain and where there is some good savings. And to go ahead and pick one of them. It really doesn't matter whether it's, you know, one of those five, because you just need to get the first one under your belt. From there, there's things you can do in terms of the analytics and understanding, you know, what processes. There's a lot of steps, you know, that the humans are taking with the applications and things like that. But those are, you know, kind of the two quick thoughts.
Yep. So Paul and Ed, you get past that starting point, you pick the process, and so, you know, based on where you are today, how would you describe it? Would you say it's end to end at this point, or is it still more siloed than you liked it to be? And then what's the backup plan if RPA isn't working? What do you do at that point?
So right now, I think we're not quite end to end. We're still picking and choosing where we see the pain points. It's, you know, just really a feel of what we're tackling right now. as far as if an RPA doesn't work, what's the backup? We stay with our manual process, look to see if there's another technology or another way to go about doing it. I mean, when I think Paul said, the pushback is to make sure you don't think about a robot first thing for anything. And I'm guilty of doing that. We go through a process flow and say, oh, I can do a robot there. But I want to have IT's counsel. Is there another smarter way to do this?
Yeah, I mean, customer operations is, we've had situations where it wasn't the robot platform. It was like, our mainframes. We have systems disruptions from time to time. And we built some resiliency into the robot process so that requests coming from the web could build up over time as we may have systems that are going down. So it's looking at, how do you build the fault tolerance and the resiliency into the robot solution that you're going to use. And if worst case scenario, if we have a complete, utter failure of the platform itself, then we have the ability to resort back to a manual process. Not ideal. We've never had to do that. We've never even come close to doing that. But there are manual processes, and you do need to make sure that you sustain those processes through training so that you don't lose that ability in operations.
Yeah, and one thing just to add on to that, when we're looking at a process, maybe you're doing this too, but there could be times where we're not going to get the whole part.
Oh, yeah.
But we're wanting to get 80%, something there. So.
Yeah, in fact, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because on our start service request, sometimes the robot can't finish the whole request, but that doesn't mean that we don't get some measure of containment. The robot may have already set up the account's sitting out there ready to be taken into another action on it, and we have to pass that off to the call center to do. So there are many situations where the robot will do the majority of the work, setting up things for the human, even if it doesn't complete the entire process end to end.
Okay. So we're running tight on time, but there's a bunch of questions here about resourcing. So maybe I can squeeze in and combine a couple of these questions. So are you guys hiring developers that are dedicated to robots, or are you tapping into existing teams? And then how hard is it to find that person? What's the learning curve like?
Yeah,
send us your resume. We're happy to hire you. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's different. Our IT group, they're hiring. They're looking for folks there externally. We're trying to develop them organically as we see this growing and our support model changing. We want to develop the capabilities that way. So we're not going off the street to bring it in. We touch technologies throughout our group. So we've got the business sense, and we're leveraging that. So at our level, we're doing it that way. IT is doing it more. Let's go hire some developers.
Yeah, I mean, IT basically, and they have this IT associates program where they bring young folks straight out of college in. They do rotations, and this has been a real successful model for bringing people into the robot side, because the robot stuff is very fast turned around. You get almost immediate gratification for the things that you're building, and you get to see immediate benefit. A lot of times at Duke, projects go on for months, if not years, and you don't necessarily see that benefit. So there's a lot of project fatigue in some of the larger efforts that we have. So this is a great way to get new people in. It's a new, exciting technology. It's an attractor. We try to use it as a way to promote, how forward-thinking Duke is, and trying to get the right people in, not necessarily filling a seat with a warm body necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. It is to attract talent, yeah, whether they're touching it or just to see where Duke is on the curve.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, Ed, thanks again for sharing your experiences, and Russ, thanks for supporting this and leading this conversation. I learned stuff. I'm sure the audience did as well. And if there's any questions we didn't get to, we'll make sure we circle back to you. But thanks everybody for your participation. Before we jump, just a couple upcoming events to make the audience aware of. We'll be in Paris, March 13th, for an automation event there, and we also have our Oasis series, hopefully coming to a city near you starting in April. And then our upcoming webinars on RPA coming over the next few weeks. We've got 2 more RPA webinars in the next few weeks. So busy time of year, but lots of good information and content. If there's anything that I can do, my team can do to help you out, or anybody on this webinar, please reach out to me. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day. Thanks for joining us.